My story began with a shocking confession. After becoming a widow, I heard the chilling words from my daughter: either you work or you're on the street. Desperate, I agreed to care for a paralyzed billionaire, and on the first night, what happened left me frozen with fear and surprise. Glad you're with me. Follow my story to the end and tell me the city you're listening from so I can understand how far my story has diverged. The funeral flowers on Dante's grave had not yet wilted when my daughter, Harlow, delivered her ultimatum. I was standing in this kitchen, the same place where I had cooked thousands of meals for my family, when Harlow walked in with an expression that said she'd already made up her mind and my feelings didn't matter. "Mom, we need to talk." She set her designer handbag down on the counter with a sharp click. At 42, Harlow had inherited her father's strong jaw, but none of his warmth. "This arrangement isn't working anymore." I was still wearing the black dress from the cemetery, still feeling the weight of saying goodbye to Dante after 45 years of marriage. My hands shook as I reached for the coffee pot. "What are you talking about, honey?" "About you living here in my house." Her voice was clear, businesslike. "Daddy left everything to me, remember? And I can't support you anymore." The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the tile floor. Brown liquid ran over the white ceramic shards, as if my life was falling apart. "Harlow, it's only been 3 weeks since how Dad died." "I know." She didn't even look at the mess. "But life goes on, Mom. I have my family to think about, my bills." I knelt down to pick up the pieces. My 68-year-old knees protested. "I have an old age pension. It's not much, but I can contribute $800 a month." Harlow laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That doesn't even cover the utilities. Look, I've been thinking about this, and I have a solution." I stopped cleaning and looked at her. My daughter, the baby I'd rocked to sleep on countless sleepless nights. The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "What's the solution?" "There's a job, private caregiver. The pay is great." She pulled out her phone and showed me the ad. "This man needs 24/7 care. You were a nurse before you married Daddy. That's perfect." My heart sank. "Harlow, I haven't been a nurse in over 40 years. Medicine has changed. I wouldn't have known how." "It's not nursing, Mom. It's more like companionship. Help with everyday tasks. You can do it." She was already scrolling through her phone. "I already contacted them. You have an interview tomorrow." I stood up slowly, the ceramic shards still embedded in my palm. "And if I don't get the job?" Harlow finally looked at me, and I saw the answer in her eyes before she spoke. "Then you'll have to find another place to live." "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't carry you forever." The next morning, I found myself standing in front of a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. The driveway alone was longer than our old street. My hands shook as I rang the doorbell, and I wondered how my life had gotten to this point. At 68, I was taking a job I wasn't qualified for because my own daughter had kicked me out. A stern-looking woman in her 50s opened the door. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Patricia, Mr. Hawthorne's housekeeper. Please come in." The inside of the house was even more intimidating than the outside. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire nursing career. Patricia led me through hallways lined with portraits of people who seemed to have never worried about money in their lives. "Mr. Hawthorne requires assistance with most of his daily activities," Patricia explained as we walked. "He's paralyzed from the waist down since an accident 5 years ago. The position includes room and board, plus a very generous salary." We stopped in front of a set of double doors. Before we go in, I must warn you, Mr. Hawthorne can be difficult. He's had 17 caregivers in the last 2 years. My heart sank. 17 caregivers? What have I gotten myself into? Patricia opened the doors, revealing a huge library with floor to ceiling windows overlooking the perfectly manicured gardens. And there, in a wheelchair by the window, sat a man with grey hair and such strong features that they must have been striking when he was younger. Mr. Hawthorne, this is Hilda Thompson, the candidate we were discussing. He turned his wheelchair toward us, and a strange sensation came over me. His eyes were blue, the deep blue you see only in old photographs of faded memories. When his gaze met mine, something flashed across his face. Recognition, confusion, I couldn't tell. Mrs. Thompson, his voice was deep, cultured, with just the slightest hint of something I couldn't place. Please sit. I sank into the chair across from him, trying to ignore the way my heart began to race. Something about his face, the way he looked at me, made my chest tighten with an emotion I couldn't name. Patricia says you were a nurse, he said, but his eyes never left my face. He seemed to be studying me, searching for something. Yes, sir. Years ago, before I was married. My voice was more confident than I felt. And your husband recently passed away. It wasn't a question. My condolences. Thank you. I glanced at my hands, still wearing Dante's ring. It was difficult. When I looked up again, Terence Hawthorne was still looking at me with that intense, almost desperate expression. Have we met before, Mrs. Thompson? Something about you seems familiar. My blood ran cold. I forced a polite smile. I don't think so, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm sure I would remember. But even as I said it, alarm bells started ringing in my head. Because there was something familiar about him too. Something about the shape of his mouth, the way he tilted his head when he spoke. Something that made my hands shake and my breath catch. Perhaps not, he murmured. But he didn't look convinced. Tell me, Mrs. Thompson, why do you want this job? The honest answer was that I was desperate, that my daughter had thrown me out and I had nowhere to go, that at 68 I was too old and too tired to start over. But I had no choice. Instead, I said, I believe in caring for people. I always have. Something in his expression softened. And you're not afraid of difficult situations? I thought about Harlow's cold eyes, about cleaning up my broken coffee cup while my daughter watched, about sleeping in the guest room of my own house because Harlow had already moved into the master bedroom. No, sir, I'm not afraid. Terence nodded slowly. Patricia, could you leave us alone for a moment? After Patricia had left, closing the door behind her, Terence rolled his chair closer to me. Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to be frank with you. I'm not an easy person to work for. I'm demanding, I'm meticulous, and I don't suffer fools lightly. But if you take this position, you'll be treated with respect and paid well, very well. He quoted a salary that made my head spin. More money than Dante had made in his best year. However, he continued, I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't gossip about my personal affairs or treat me like an invalid. Can you be that person? I looked into those blue eyes and felt that strange thrill of recognition again. Yes, Mr. Hawthorne, I can. Okay. He extended his hand to shake mine, and when our fingers touched, I felt an electric shock that had nothing to do with static. Welcome to my home, Hilda. The way he said my name, softly and almost reverently, made my heart skip a beat. I quickly pulled my hand away, telling myself it was just my imagination. I was a widow, for God's sake, a grandmother. I had no right to feel anything for this man. But when Patricia showed me around my quarters later that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just taken a turn I wasn't prepared for. And the way Terence Hawthorne looked at me as if he was seeing a ghost from his past made me wonder if I was about to discover something I'd been trying to forget for 48 years. My first week at the Hawthorne mansion felt like living in a beautiful prison. The room Patricia assigned me was larger than my entire apartment with Dante, with its own sitting area and a bathroom as gleaming as a luxury hotel. But every morning when I woke up, I felt the crushing weight of my new reality. At 68, I was essentially a live-in servant. Terence was exactly what Patricia had warned him would be: demanding, meticulous, with a sharp tongue when things weren't done to his specifications. He wanted his morning coffee at 7:15 sharp, not 7:20. His newspapers had to be in a certain order. His medication schedule was rigid, and God forbid I was a minute late. But there were moments, quiet moments, between his orders and criticisms when I would catch him watching me with the same intense expression from our first meeting, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle that had been plaguing him for years. "Hilda," he said on Thursday morning, as I laid out his breakfast tray. "It's an unusual name. Family name?" I paused, cutting into his grapefruit. "My grandmother's name. She was German." "German?" he repeated thoughtfully. "Where did you grow up?" "Here and there." I tried to keep my tone neutral, but my hands were shaking slightly. "My father moved a lot for his job." That wasn't entirely a lie. We moved a lot, though not for his job, more to escape creditors and my father's gambling debts. But some memories were better left buried. That afternoon, while Terence was napping, I finally unpacked the 3 boxes Harlow had reluctantly allowed me to take from the house. Most of them were practical things: clothes, a few books, my jewelry box. But at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in tissue paper, was something I had almost forgotten I still had: my old photo albums. I packed them up without thinking, probably because they had been sitting on my nightstand since I'd looked through them on those first lonely nights after Dante's funeral. Now, sitting in the elegant chair by my bedroom window, I unfolded them with trembling fingers. The first album was from my wedding to Dante. Our wedding photos, pictures of little Harlow, family vacations, a lifetime of neat, respectable memories. I put it down and reached for the old one, the one I rarely looked at anymore. The cover was faded blue leather, cracked at the corners. Inside were photographs of my life before Dante, before marriage and motherhood, and the neat, controlled existence I had built for myself. The first few pages were innocent enough: graduation, my friends from nursing school, my parents looking young and hopeful. But as I turned the pages, my breath quickened. There, on page 12, was a photograph that made the world reel. I was 20 years old in the picture, wearing a yellow sundress I'd made myself. My hair was long and dark, tied in a ribbon. I was laughing at something the photographer said, throwing my head back in pure joy. And standing next to me, his arm around my waist, his face lit up with a smile that could melt hearts, was a young man with dark hair and stunning blue eyes, Terry Hawthorne. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the album. Terry, not Terence. Terry, who loved jazz music, and chocolate ice cream, and the way I looked in that yellow dress. Terry, who promised to marry me as soon as he got rich. Terry, who kissed me goodbye on a train platform 48 years ago and never came back. I stared at the photograph until my eyes burned, trying to reconcile the young man in the picture with the gray haired man in the wheelchair below. The features were the same: those aristocratic cheekbones, the strong jaw, the eyes that seemed to look straight into your soul. But Terry was warm, passionate, full of dreams and wild plans for our future together. This Terence Hawthorne was cold, reserved, bitter. What had happened to turn one into the other? I turned the page with shaking fingers and found more photographs. Terry and I at a county fair, sharing cotton candy. Terry teaching me to dance in my tiny apartment, while my elderly neighbor pounded on the ceiling. Terry and I sitting by a lake, my head on his shoulder, both of us looking like we believed that love could conquer all. The last photograph in the series was taken the morning he left. We were standing on the train platform, his suitcase at his feet. I cried. I remembered that day with painful clarity now, and he had cupped my face in his hands, promising he would be back within 2 years, rich enough to give me everything I deserved. "I'm going to make something of myself, Hilda," he had said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to build an empire, and then I'll come back for you. Will you wait for me?" And I had promised I would. God help me. I meant it. But 2 years stretched into 3, then 4. His letters became sporadic, then stopped altogether. I heard rumors that he had made it in real estate, but by then I had met Dante. Sweet, reliable Dante, who loved me unconditionally, who didn't need to conquer the world to prove his worth. I married Dante 6 months before Terence, finally sent word that he was coming home. The letter was still there, tucked behind the last photograph. I pulled it out with trembling fingers, even though I knew every word by heart. "My dear Hilda," it began in his bold handwriting. "I did it. Everything I promised you, and more. I'm coming home next month, and then we can finally begin our life together. I've bought a house, our home, and I can't wait to carry you over the threshold as my wife. All my love, all my dreams, all my tomorrows are yours. Forever yours, Terry." The letter was dated 3 weeks after my wedding to Dante. I clutched the letter to my chest, and tears streamed down my face. All these years, I had convinced myself that Terry had forgotten about me, that his promises were the empty words of a young man drunk with his own ambition. But he had kept his word. He had come back for me. I just belonged to someone else. A soft knock on my door made me jump. I quickly stuffed the album and the letter under my pillow and wiped my eyes. "Come in." Patricia came in, a worried expression on her face. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Hawthorne wants you. He seems worried." I smoothed my hair and followed Patricia downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. Could he remember? Was that why he was staring at me? I found Terence in his office, looking out the window at the gardens. He turned his wheelchair when he heard my footsteps, and I saw something different in his expression. Not the cold control I was used to, but something raw, more vulnerable. "Hilda," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." I clasped my hands in front of me to hide the trembling. "Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. Have you ever been to Millbrook? It's a small town about 2 hours north of here." My breath caught in my throat. Millbrook was where I grew up, where I met Terry, where I first fell in love. I'm not sure," I lied. But my voice gave me away. Terence studied my face with those piercing blue eyes. "There was a diner, Murphy's, I think it was called, and a little lake where young people went on Sunday afternoons. I felt the blood drain from my face. Murphy's, where Terry bought me a cherry coke and told me jokes that made my sides hurt. The lake where he kissed me for the first time under the stars. Mr. Hawthorne, I think you may have me confused with someone else. But even as I said it, I could see in his eyes that he wasn't confused at all. The mask of cold control was slipping away, revealing the man I'd once loved with every fiber of my being. Perhaps, he said softly, but his gaze never left my face. Perhaps I am confused. As I turned to leave, I heard him whisper something that nearly made my knees buckle. The yellow dress. You always looked beautiful in yellow. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Terry's younger face in those photographs. I heard his voice, promising to come back for me. And down below, the man he had become was probably lying awake too, piecing together the same memories that were tearing my heart apart. By morning, I had made my decision. I couldn't pretend anymore. This fast was eating me alive, and it was clear that Terry, was remembering more every day. Better to face the truth than to let it slowly destroy us both. I found him in the conservatory, reading the morning paper. The sunlight streaming through the glass walls played with the silver in his hair. And for a moment, I saw both versions of him superimposed. The young man full of dreams, and the successful, lonely man he had become. Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne. I placed his coffee exactly where he liked it, my hands surprisingly steady. Hilda, he said, looking up from his newspaper, and I saw the weariness in those blue eyes. Did you sleep well? No, I said honestly. Did you? The ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, I kept thinking about the yellow dresses and the cherry coke at Murphy's. My breath caught in my throat. No point in denying it any longer. The cherry coke was too sweet. You always said I should have vanilla, but I was stubborn. Terence closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. Hilda Marie Brennan, you wore your grandmother's locket, and you had a scar on your left knee from a bike accident when you were 8. I automatically touched my throat where the locket had been. You gave me a ring, a small silver band with the promise that someday you would replace it with diamonds. I still have it. His voice was barely audible. I carried it with me for 48 years. We looked at each other across the space that separated us, not just the few feet between his wheelchair and where I stood, but decades of different lives, different choices, different kinds of love. Why didn't you tell me who you were? He asked. I sank into the chair across from him, suddenly feeling all 68 years old. Because I was afraid. Because I'm not the girl you remember. I paused, taking a shaky breath. Because you're not the boy I remember. Terence nodded slowly. When I came back and found out you'd married Dante Thompson, I wanted to hate you. I told myself you never really loved me, that you were just waiting for someone better to come along. That's not true. The words came out louder than I'd expected. I waited, Terry. I waited until I couldn't wait anymore. Your letters stopped coming, and I wiped away a tear. I thought you'd forgotten about me. I never stopped writing, he said quietly. But my business associates convinced me that a small town girl would slow me down. They intercepted my letters, told me you'd moved on. By the time I realized what they'd done, you were married. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. All those years of doubt, of feeling abandoned, All the while, Terry tried to reach me. I hired a private investigator to follow you, Terence continued. I know it sounds terrible, but I needed to know you were happy. I knew when Harlow was born, when you moved into the house on Maple Street, when Dante got a promotion at the bank. I even knew when he got sick. I stared at him, shocked. You've been watching me from afar for 48 years. I never interfered, never tried to contact you. I just. I needed to know you were okay. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. And I kept hoping that someday, somehow, fate would bring you back to me. With trembling hands, he opened the box to reveal the silver ring he had given me so many years ago. The same one I had given him back in tears the day before my wedding, unable to bear the promise of another man when I gave my life to Dante. You kept it, I whispered. I kept everything, every photograph, every letter you wrote to me, every memory. He looked at the ring. I never married Hilda. I told myself it was because I was too focused on business. But the truth was simpler. No one else was you. The weight of his words fell between us like a stone dropped into still water. 48 years of being alone, building walls around my heart, watching the woman I loved live her life with someone else. Terry, I didn't know what to say. How? How do I apologize for a lifetime of separation that neither of you chose? I don't blame you, he said quickly. You made the right choice. Dante was a good man. He loved you the way you deserved, and he was there for me when I couldn't. I've made peace with that. And you? I asked quietly, because the man I'd been working with for the past few weeks seemed to be making peace with nothing. Terry's jaw tightened. The accident changed me. 5 years ago, I was still clinging to the fantasy that maybe we'd meet again someday, that maybe there would be some second chance. Then I woke up in a hospital bed, paralyzed from the waist down, and realized how stupid I'd been. What could I offer you now? A broken man in a wheelchair? Stop! I stood up abruptly, anger flaring in my chest. Just stop. Do you think I'm so shallow that your legs are more important than your heart? Do you think I'm the kind of woman who would turn her back on someone she cared about because he needed help instead of being able to give it? He was taken aback by my ardor. Hilda! I loved you, Terry. Not your potential fortune, not your grandiose plans for the future. I loved the boy who brought me wildflowers because he couldn't afford roses. The boy who held me when I cried over my father's drinking. The boy who believed in dreams so much that I couldn't help but believe in them too. I cried. 48 years of repressed emotion poured out of me like water through a broken dam. And if that boy is still out there, then everything else is just details. Terence reached for my hand, and I let him take it. His fingers were older now, age-spotted, and thinner than I remembered. But his touch still sent an electric jolt through my veins. He's still here, he said quietly, buried under a lot of bitterness and disappointment. But still here. The question is, what do we do now? I looked around the greenhouse, the luxurious life he had built around himself. Then I looked at his face again, searching for an answer to the question I was afraid to ask. Are you happy, Terry? Really happy? He was silent for a long moment. I was successful. I was respected. I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. He paused. But happy? No. I don't think I've been truly happy since the day I left you on that train platform. Then maybe, I said carefully, it's time to stop punishing ourselves for the choices we made when we were different people. Maybe it's time to see what we, the people of today, can build together. Terence lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Would you like to try? Not as my nurse, but as whatever we might be to each other. I thought of Harlow, of the cold house where I was no longer welcome. I thought of the lonely apartment I was going to find, of spending the rest of my years alone. Then I looked at the man who had loved me faithfully for almost 5 decades, even from a distance. Yes, I whispered, I'd like to try. But even as the words left my lips, I knew our path would not be easy. Harlow would have something to say about this arrangement, and I doubted it would be congratulatory. My daughter had never approved of anything that took attention away from her own needs, and she certainly wouldn't approve of her mother finding love again. The thought of facing Harlow's reaction made me anxious and my stomach twist. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something else too. Hope. Maybe it wasn't too late for a second chance. 3 weeks after our confession in the conservatory, Terry asked me to move into the master bedroom of the house, not as his nurse, but as his companion. The word sounded strange on my tongue as I repeated it to myself. Companion. It sounded far more meaningful than employee, but not as binding as the words we'd once dreamed of. You don't have to decide right now, he said over dinner, in the small dining room we'd taken to using as a front door. But Hilda, I want you to know that this isn't about comfort or loneliness. It's about the life I should have been living all along. I put my fork down, my appetite suddenly gone. Terry, there's something I need to tell you about Harlow. His expression grew serious. What's wrong with her? She doesn't know who you are. When she found me this job, she just saw the money. A rich man who needs care. A mother she wanted to throw out of her house. She has no idea of our history. Terry nodded slowly. And you think she'll have a problem with our arrangement? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My daughter threw me out 3 weeks after her father's funeral. She cares about two things: her own comfort and other people's money. When she finds out I'm not just living here as hired help, she'll assume I'm after your inheritance. And you? Terry asked quietly. I looked at him in shock. How can you ask that? Because 48 years is a long time, Hilda. People change. And my wealth, he gestured around the elegant dining room. It has a way of changing the way people see me. I stood up abruptly, pain stabbing me like a knife. If that's how you think of me, then maybe it was a mistake. Sit down. His voice was gentle but firm. Please. I had to ask. I've been burned before by people who said they loved me, but were really in love with my bank account. I needed to hear it from you. I stood there, arms crossed. Say what? That I don't want your money? That I'm here because of who I am and not because of what I have? I shouldn't say that. You need to know. Terry reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. You're right, I should. And deep down, I know that. But Hilda, you have to understand. When you have so much money, you start to question the motives of everyone, even the people closest to you. My anger subsided slightly. Is that really how you lived all these years? Trusting no one? Almost. He looked at his hands. It's a lonely way to live. But it seemed safer than being hurt again. I sat back down, studying his face. The lines around his eyes. The way the corners of his mouth turned down. That's what success without love had done to him. Turned him into a suspicious, isolated man who doubted even the purest emotions. For the record, I said quietly, I don't want your money. I want you to give every penny to charity if it makes you happy. I have an old age pension and a small pension from the hospital where I worked before Harlow was born. It's not much, but I lived on less. Relief spread across his face. I'm sorry I had to ask. Don't apologize, just don't ask again. I picked up my fork and took a bite of Patricia's salmon. Now about Harlow. When she finds out, she'll cause trouble. I need you to be prepared for this. Terry's expression hardened. What problems? She'll probably demand to know your intentions. She might threaten to sue, claim I'm taking advantage of you. She might even try to remove me from the house. Let her try. His voice was like the steel that had built his business empire. This is my home, Hilda. No one tells me who I can or can't invite to live in it. I wish I could share his confidence, but I knew my daughter better than he did. Harlow could be ruthless when she felt threatened, and she would certainly feel threatened by this development. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Harlow's name appeared on the screen, and my stomach clenched. Oh my, I muttered, showing Terry the display. Answer, he said. Let's get this over with. I swiped to accept the call. Hi, Harlow. Mom. Her voice was tight, barely contained with anger. I just had a very interesting conversation with Mrs. Patterson from the church. She said she saw you at the grocery store with a man in a wheelchair, and you were being very familiar with him. I closed my eyes. In a small town like this, surely someone would see us and report us to Harlow. Terry and I had gone to the market together yesterday, and he had insisted on buying the ingredients for a chocolate cake I had mentioned I had missed since I was a child. To anyone watching, we probably looked more intimate than employer and employee. His name is Terence Hawthorne, I said carefully. He's the man I work for. Working or studying. Harlow's voice was accusatory because Mrs. Patterson said, you two seemed awfully cozy for a professional relationship. Terry gestured to the phone, and I shook my head. This was my battle. Harlow, I'm 68 years old. I think I can handle myself. You're sleeping with him? The sharp question hit me like a slap. It's none of your business. It's my business if you bring shame on our family name. Before Papa's even cooled in the ground, you're throwing yourself at the first rich man who takes notice of you. A furious rage filled me. How dare you? Your father died 2 months ago, and I mourned him according to all the rules. But I'm not dead, Harlow. I'm allowed to have a companionship. A companionship? Harlow laughed coldly. Is that what we call gold digging these days? Terry's face went white with anger. He pointed at the phone more insistently, and this time I handed it to him. Miss Thompson, he said icily, this is Terence Hawthorne. I think you need to understand something. I heard Harlow's shocked silence through the phone. Then her voice suddenly became much more respectful. Mr. Hawthorne, since I didn't know you were there. Obviously. Now listen very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. Your mother is not a gold digger. She doesn't disgrace anyone, and she certainly doesn't throw herself at me. If anything, I'm the one pursuing her. Sir, I think there may be some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Terry interrupted, is your belief that you have any say in your mother's personal life. She's a grown woman who can make her own decisions about who she spends her time with. But she's vulnerable right now. She's grieving, and she may not be thinking clearly. Your mother is one of the strongest, clearest thinking women I've ever met. The fact that you can't see that says more about you than it does about her. There was silence on the other end of the line for several seconds. When Harlow spoke again, her voice had taken on a different quality, harder, more calculating. Mr. Hawthorne, I value your friendship with my mother, but I hope you understand my concerns. She's been through a lot lately, and I just want to make sure she's not being taken advantage of. The only person who's taken advantage of your mother lately, Terry said quietly, is you. Another silence. Then Harlow's voice, cold as winter. I'd like to meet with you, Mr. Hawthorne, to discuss this situation properly. Terry looked at me, raising his eyebrows. I nodded reluctantly. Better to face this than to let Harlow hatch plans in secret. Okay, Terry said. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 on Kunk. I'll be there. Harlow hung up without saying goodbye. Terry handed the phone back to me, his jaw clenched in anger. Well, that went about as well as I expected. I sat back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. She's going to try to turn you against me. She'll make it look like I've been manipulating you, like I've planned this whole thing. Let her try. Terry reached across the table and took my hand. Hilda, I want you to understand something. I didn't survive 48 years in business by being easily manipulated. And I certainly didn't build this empire by letting people tell me who I could and couldn't care less about. She can be very persuasive when she wants to be, and I can be very stubborn when I need to be. He squeezed my hand. Your daughter doesn't scare me. The only thing that scares me is the thought of losing you again. That night I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, dreading the daytime confrontation. I knew Harlow would come armed with arguments designed to drive a wedge between Terry and me. She would portray me as a desperate widow preying on a lonely invalid. She would question my motives, my timing, my very right to seek happiness again. But as I fell asleep, I held on to Terry's words. The only thing that scares me is the thought of losing you again. Tomorrow, I would find out if that was true. Harlow arrived promptly at 2 a.m., dressed in her best black suit, as if she were going to a business meeting rather than visiting her mother. I watched from the window as she stepped out of the car, adjusting her skirt and checking her reflection in the side mirror. Even from a distance, I could see the calculation in her movements, the way she squared her shoulders like a soldier preparing for battle. Terry had insisted that we meet in his office rather than one of the more comfortable sitting rooms. If she wants to treat this as a business meeting, he had said, then we will meet her on those terms. Patricia ushered Harlow in, and I felt my stomach clench as my daughter's eyes scanned the room, taking in the expensive furniture, the original works of art, the massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. I could almost see the dollar signs reflected in her pupils. Mr. Hawthorne, Harlow extended her hand with practiced grace. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Terry shook her hand briefly, his expression neutral. Miss Thompson, please sit down. Harlow settled into the leather chair across from Terry's desk, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. She looked like the successful real estate agent she was, all polished confidence and professional charm. Only I could see the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her fingers. I hope you understand that I'm only here out of concern for my mother, she began, her voice warm with false sincerity. She's been through so much lately, and I'm worried that she might be making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. And what would those decisions be? Terry asked softly. Harlow looked at me, then back at Terry. Well, it's a living arrangement, for one thing. It's highly unusual for a caregiver to move into her employer's private quarters. It raises questions about the nature of your relationship. What questions? Terry's voice was calm, but I could hear the steel beneath it. Questions about boundaries, about appropriate professional behavior. Harlow leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm sure you're a wonderful person, but my mother is vulnerable right now. She's grieving, she's financially insecure, and she may be confusing gratitude with other feelings. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Harlow, that's enough. It's all right, Hilda. Terry kept his eyes on my daughter. I'd like to hear what Miss Thompson has to say. Harlow shot me a warning glance, then turned to Terry with new confidence. I'm saying that my mother has always been a bit impressionable. She sees the best in people, sometimes to her own detriment. And in her current state, she may not be thinking clearly about the implications of this situation. The implications of what exactly? Well, there's the obvious worry about what people will think. A widow moving in with a rich man so soon after her husband's death. It doesn't look good. Harlow's voice took on a concerned, caring tone that made my skin crawl. And then there's the question of what happens when this arrangement is over. Will my mother be left with nothing again? Will she have to start all over again? Terry leaned back in his wheelchair, steepling his fingers in front of him. These are interesting points. Tell me, Miss Thompson, what do you think would be best for your mother? Harlow's eyes lit up, thinking she had found a loophole. I think she should go home to her family, where she belongs, where she can grieve properly and make rational decisions about her future. And by house, you mean the house you inherited from your father? The house you asked her to leave? Harlow had the decency to look uncomfortable. It was a misunderstanding. I was emotional, dealing with my own grief. Of course, my mother is always welcome in my home. For how long? Terry asked quietly. I'm sorry. How long would your mother be welcome? Until you decided she was a burden again? Until the next time you needed space for your own family? Harlow's mask slipped slightly, revealing the calculating woman beneath. Mr. Hawthorne, I don't think you understand the complexities of family relationships. Oh, I understand perfectly. Terry's voice cut through her words like a blade. I understand that you threw your mother out 3 weeks after burying her husband of 45 years. I understand that you gave her an ultimatum, work or live on the street. And I understand that the only reason you're here now is because you realized she could do better than what you were offering. Harlow's face flushed. That's not. I was protecting her, teaching her to be independent by making her homeless. She wasn't homeless. She had options. Harlow looked frantically between Terry and me, clearly not expecting to be put on the defensive. She could find an apartment. She has an old age pension, $800 a month. Terry said quietly. Do you know what the average rent is in this area, Miss Thompson? Harlow's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. Down to $200, Terry continued. For a one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, your mother would be $400 short each month just for rent. That doesn't include food, utilities, medical expenses, or any other living expenses. She could find something cheaper. Where? What part of town? You were willing to let your 68-year-old mother live in poverty rather than make things more inconvenient for yourself. I watched this exchange with a feeling of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction, because someone was finally holding Harlow accountable for her cruelty. Sadness, because that someone had to be a stranger, not my daughter's own conscience. Harlow's professional composure was quickly crumbling. You don't understand. My mother, she's always been difficult, demanding. She expects everyone to take care of her. Demanding? I couldn't keep quiet any longer. Harlow, I worked 2 jobs so you could go to college. I took care of your father through 5 years of cancer treatment without a single complaint. I babysat your kids every weekend for free, and I never asked you for anything except space to grieve for my husband. You were suffocating me? Harlow exploded, her mask finally falling completely. Always there, always trying to help, always making me feel guilty for having my own life. I needed space to breathe, so you kicked me out, I said quietly. I gave you a chance to finally stand on your own 2 feet. The silence that followed was deafening. Terry looked at Harlow with such cold disgust that she actually cringed in her seat. Miss Thompson, he said finally, I think that's it. Wait. Harlow's voice was desperate now. You don't understand what you're getting into. My mother? She has expectations. She'll want marriage, security, legal protection. She's not just looking for companionship. Terry's expression didn't change. What if she's looking for those things? What if I want to give them to her? Harlow froze. What are you saying? I'm saying that your mother and I are adults who can make our own decisions about our relationship. Whether this bond remains as it is now or develops into something more is none of your business. Something more? Harlow's voice was barely audible. Terry reached into a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box, the same one he had shown me in the conservatory, containing the silver ring of our youth. Your mother and I have a history that predates your father, predates you, predates everything you think you know about her life. Harlow looked at the box as if it were a poisonous snake. What history? The one that matters, Terry said simply. We once loved each other very deeply. Circumstances tore us apart, but they didn't destroy what we felt. And now, 48 years later, we have a chance to see if what we had was real enough to survive time and change. You're talking about marriage. Harlow's voice was flat, emotionless. I'm talking about living the life we were meant to live all along. Harlow turned to me, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. That's why you took this job, isn't it? You knew who he was. You planned this whole thing. No, I said firmly. I had no idea Terry was here when I answered the job ad. I thought he was dead, or married, or living on the other side of the world. The last thing I expected was to find him in this wheelchair, in this house. Terry, Harlow said, venom dripping from his voice. You call him Terry? That's my name, Terry said calmly. Terence is what my business partners call me. Terry is what the people I love call me. Harlow stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is crazy. You're both crazy. You think you can just pick up where you left off 48 years ago? You think you can erase an entire life? We're not trying to erase anything, I said. We're trying to build something new from what's left. What about Dad? What about your marriage, your family, everything you built together? Your dad was a good man and I loved him, but Terry was my first love. And some things are never truly over. Harlow looked at us with growing panic. He's using you, Mom. Don't you see? He's lonely and crippled and you're convenient. When he gets tired of playing house, you'll be out on the street again. That's enough. Terry's voice cut through the air like a whip. You won't talk about your mother like that in my house. Your house? Harlow laughed bitterly. Yes, let's talk about your house, your money, your power. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Terry opened the desk drawer again and pulled out a thick legal document. Since you're so worried about money, perhaps you should know that I've already updated my will. Everything I have is going to charity: a children's hospital, a homeless shelter, an animal rescue. Your mother will not inherit a penny from me. Harlow stared at the document, her face pale. What are you? I told him to do it, I said quietly. I don't want his money, Harlow. I never have. I want him. Something in my daughter's face collapsed then, like a building stripped of its support. For a moment, she looked like that little girl who crawled into my bed during a thunderstorm, scared, confused, and desperate for comfort. But then the mask snapped back into place, harder and colder than before. Okay, she said, her voice icy. Okay, throw your life away on some 50-year-old fantasy. But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. She turned and walked toward the door, then paused, her hand on the handle. And don't expect me to be here to pick up the pieces when he's done with you. The door slammed behind her with such force that the windows shook. Terry and I sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sound of Harlow's car starting up and driving away. Finally, Terry reached across the table and took my hand. Are you okay? I considered the question, testing my emotions like I was probing a sore tooth. Am I okay? My daughter had just disowned me, accused me of being a gold digger and a fool, and stormed out of my life with every intention of never returning. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how confident I sounded. I think so. 6 months later, I stood in the same conservatory where Terry and I had first acknowledged our past. But everything had changed. The morning light, filtering through the glass walls, played with the simple gold ring on my left hand. Not the elaborate diamond Terry had once promised to replace my silver ring with, but something better. Something that was chosen by the people we became, not the dreams of who we thought we would be. We were married quietly 3 weeks ago, with only Patricia and Terry, the lawyer, present. It wasn't the grand wedding I'd imagined as a 20-year-old girl, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Two people who had found their way to each other against all odds, promising to spend the rest of their time together. Mrs. Hawthorne, Patricia said, entering the conservatory with her usual businesslike manner. But I caught the small smile she was trying to hide. Even Patricia, stern and practical, had softened toward our unusual romance. There's someone at the front door asking for you. My heart sank. I'd been expecting this visit for months, ever since the wedding announcement appeared in the local paper. Harlow had been silent since the terrible confrontation in Terry's office, but I knew she'd heard the news. In a small town like this, everyone knew everything. Who is it? I asked, although I already knew. Your daughter, ma'am? She seems upset. I found Terry in his office, reviewing quarterly reports for the foundation he had set up to manage his charitable giving. He looked up as I entered, immediately reading the tension on my face. She's here, I said simply. Terry put the papers down and rolled his chair to face me. You want me to handle this? No, she's my daughter. This is my conversation. I smoothed my hands down my skirt, trying to calm my nerves. But I'd like you to be there, if you don't mind. Of course. We found Harlow in the front parlor, sitting on the edge of the velvet sofa, as if ready to run at any moment. She had lost weight since I'd last seen her, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She looked older, more fragile, and for a moment my maternal instincts kicked in. Harlow. I kept my voice neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. Mom, she said, standing up, hugging herself protectively. Congratulations on your marriage. I heard it was wonderful. It was. I settled into the chair across from her, Terry pulling his wheelchair next to me. Simple, but wonderful. Harlow's eyes darted to our joined hands, to the matching gold rings we wore. You really did it. You really married him. I did. For better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. There was a note of bitterness in her voice that made my heart clench. All of it, I said firmly. Every vow, every promise. Harlow laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. You know what's the worst part? I really thought you might come back after the novelty wore off. After you realized what you'd given up, I thought you'd come home. This is my home now, with him. She looked at Terry with barely concealed hurt. With a man you barely know. I know him better than you think, I said quietly. And more importantly, I know myself better than I did 6 months ago. Harlow was silent for a long moment, looking down at the Persian rug beneath her feet. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I was thinking about what you said about Dad and your first love, and how some things are never truly over. She took a shaky breath. I looked through Dad's papers after you left. I found some letters. My breath caught in my throat. What letters? Love letters to someone named Jennifer, dated 2 years before he died. Harlow's voice was barely audible. He was having an affair, Mom. At least 2 years, maybe longer. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dante, my trusty, faithful Dante, had been unfaithful while I was taking care of him during his illness, while I was holding his hand during chemotherapy and pretending not to notice how much weight he was losing. He was writing love letters to another woman. Terry's hand tightened around mine, calming me, keeping me steady. I'm sorry, Harlow continued. I know it hurts, but I thought you should know that maybe your marriage wasn't as perfect as I always thought. I closed my eyes, processing the revelation. It should have destroyed me. It should have made me question everything I thought I knew about my life with Dante. Instead, I felt something unexpected, relief. Thank you for telling me, I finally said. Harlow looked surprised. You're not angry. I'm sad, disappointed, but not angry. I wondered how to explain what I was feeling. Your father was a good man who made some bad choices. It doesn't erase the good years we had together, but it does put things in their proper place. In what way? In the sense that maybe I don't have to devote my entire life to his memory. Maybe I shouldn't feel guilty for finding happiness again. Harlow was crying, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. I was so jealous of you, Mom, so angry that you could just move on, start over, be happy. I couldn't understand how you could forget Dad so easily. I haven't forgotten him. I never will. But I also couldn't stay frozen in grief forever. And I made it worse by throwing you out. Harlow's voice broke completely. I was so hurt, so angry about the affair, and I took it out on you. I blamed you for not being good enough to keep him faithful, and then I blamed you for being too much when you needed support. The pieces of my daughter's behavior finally fell into place. The sudden coldness after Dante's funeral, the cruel ultimatum, the desperate need to control my life. Harlow didn't protect herself from my grief. She drowned in her own anger and disappointment. Oh, honey. I stood up and sat next to her on the couch. You should have told me. How could I? How could I tell you that your perfect husband was a cheater? That everything you believed in your marriage was a lie? It wasn't all a lie, I said softly. The early years were real, the love was real, even if it changed over time, and you were real. The best thing that came out of this marriage. Harlow snuggled into me, and for the first time in months, she felt like my daughter again, not a stranger in a familiar guise. I was so terrible to you, she whispered. You were hurt. There's a difference. Can you forgive me? I glanced across the room at Terry, who was watching us with quiet understanding. He nodded slightly, urging me to follow my heart. I forgive you, I said. But things can't go back to the way they were. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago, and neither are you. Harlow pulled back to look at me. What does that mean? It means that if you want to be a part of my life, you need to accept my choices, every single one of them. You must respect my marriage, my husband, and my right to be happy. And if you can't, then we will love each other from a distance. I will not let anyone, not even you, make me feel ashamed of the life I'm building. Harlow was silent for a long time, considering my words. Finally, she turned to Terry. I owe you an apology too, she said. I said terrible things about you, about your relationship with your mother. I was wrong. Terry inclined his head graciously. Grief makes us all say things we don't mean. You? You really love her? With everything I have, Terry said without hesitation. I've loved her for 48 years. Finding her again is the greatest gift I've ever received. Harlow looked at us, noticing the way Terry's eyes softened when he looked at me, the way my hand automatically sought his when I was nervous or excited. Slowly, something in her expression changed. I can see it, she said, surprised. The way you look at each other, it's like you're the only two people in the world. Sometimes it feels that way, I admitted. Harlow paused again, then asked, Are you happy, Mom? Really happy? I thought about the question, about the life I'd built in this house with this man. The quiet mornings we spent reading together in the conservatory. The way Terry still brought me wildflowers from the garden because he remembered they were my favorites. The satisfaction I felt falling asleep next to him every night, knowing that whatever time we had left, we were spending it together. Yes, I said, I'm happy. Harlow nodded slowly, then stood. Then I guess I need to learn to be happy for you. Does that mean? Does that mean I want to try? I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me. I want to know Terry as your husband, not your employer. And I want to make up for the lost months when I was angry, jealous, and cruel. I stood up and hugged her. The first real hug I'd had since Dante's funeral. I'd like that very much. When Harlow pulled away, she glanced around the elegant living room, then back at me. This is really your home now? It is. And you really are Mrs. Hawthorne? I am. She smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in over a year. It will take some getting used to. But Mom, yes, you deserve it. You deserve to be loved, cherished, and spoiled a little. I'm sorry it took me so long to see this. After Harlow left, promising to call soon and asking if she could bring her children to meet her new stepfather, Terry and I sat together in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and pink. Do you think she's serious? I asked about wanting to rekindle our relationship. I think she's her mother's daughter, Terry said. And this means that she is stronger and more forgiving than she thinks. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the last vestiges of tension drain from my shoulders. For the first time in years, all the pieces of my life seemed to fall into place. Terry M., thank you for fighting for us, for not giving up when things got tough. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Thank you for giving an old love with an old man a chance, for seeing past the wheelchair and the walls I'd built around my heart. We're an unusual couple, aren't we? Two people in their 70s, starting over like teenagers. The best couple, Terry said. The ones who know how precious love is and don't waste time taking it for granted. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the path that had led me here. The pain of losing Dante, the humiliation of being exiled by my own daughter, the fear of starting over with only memories and pride. But sometimes, I realized, you have to lose everything to find what you were really looking for all this time. And sometimes, the love you thought was lost forever was just patiently waiting for you to come home. Now, I'm curious to know your opinion, listeners of my story. What would you do in my place? Have you experienced anything similar? Write in the comments below. In the meantime, I'm leaving two other stories on the final screen that are channel favorites and will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching to the end.